The warning ignored Commander Velrix stood before the massive stellar map that dominated the bridge of the Zalathian warship Eternal Conquest. His forearms moved gracefully as he manipulated the holographic display, zooming in on a peculiar region of space that had caught his attention. The area was marked with ancient warning symbols that predated even the oldest civilizations in the galactic assembly. His crystalline eyes reflected the red glow of the restricted zone markers surrounding a small yellow star system. The Zalathian Empire had grown bold in recent centuries. They had conquered 17 star systems in the past 100 cycles alone, and their military might was considered second to none in the known galaxy. Velrix himself had led successful campaigns against species that other empires deemed unconquerable. His purple-scaled skin bore the ceremonial scars of countless victories, each one a testament to his strategic brilliance and ruthless efficiency in battle. His second-in-command, Subcommander Krylos, approached with measured steps. The younger Zalathian scales were still bright green, unmarked by battle scars. He had studied at the finest military academies and possessed theoretical knowledge that impressed even veteran commanders. Yet he had never faced true combat, never seen the chaos that erupted when carefully laid plans met the unpredictability of war. Commander Velrix pointed at the restricted zone with one of his lower arms while his upper arms continued manipulating the display. The system in question contained 9 planets orbiting a medium-sized yellow star. The third planet from the star showed signs of extensive civilization, though the energy signatures were puzzling. They seemed both incredibly advanced and strangely primitive at the same time. The ancient database identified this species as humans, though records about them were sparse and contradictory. Some texts described them as a young species that had barely achieved spaceflight. Others contained cryptic warnings about their unprecedented adaptability and their disturbing tendency to weaponize absolutely everything they encountered. The most puzzling aspect was the quarantine order itself, established over 4,000 cycles ago by civilizations that no longer existed. Sub-Commander Krylos studied the data streams flowing across his personal display. The mathematics didn't make sense to him. How could a species confined to a single star system for so long pose any threat to the mighty Zalathian Empire? Their fleet consisted of over 300 warships, each equipped with plasma cannons that could crack planetary crusts and shields that could withstand supernovas. They had conquered species with technology far more advanced than what these humans appeared to possess. Commander Velrix made his decision with the confidence that came from decades of military success. He would send a reconnaissance force to investigate this mysterious species. If they proved hostile, the Empire would simply add another conquered system to its vast territories. If they were peaceful, perhaps they could be useful as a servant species. Either way, the ancient warnings were clearly outdated superstitions from a more primitive time. The reconnaissance force consisted of 5 scout ships, each one equipped with the latest stealth technology and crewed by the Empire's finest intelligence officers. They jumped through hyperspace and emerged at the edge of the Sol system, immediately beginning their passive scans of the inner planets. What they found defied all their expectations and challenged everything they thought they knew about technological development. The humans had not expanded beyond their home system, yet they had transformed every celestial body into something useful. Mars had been terraformed into a garden world. Venus's atmosphere had been converted into a massive industrial complex floating in the clouds. The moons of Jupiter and Saturn housed military installations that seemed to violate several laws of physics. Most disturbing of all, Earth itself was surrounded by thousands of satellites and stations, creating a defensive grid of unprecedented complexity. Lieutenant Zara Williams sat at her monitoring station aboard the United Earth Defense Platform 7, sipping coffee from a mug that read, "World's Okayest Space Traffic Controller." Her job was normally boring, tracking commercial vessels and occasional tourist ships from the Mars colonies. But today her screens lit up with anomalies that made her nearly spill her coffee. 5 unidentified vessels had appeared at the edge of the system, and their energy signatures matched nothing in the human database. She followed protocol perfectly, sending the alert through the proper channels while maintaining passive observation of the alien vessels. Within minutes, Admiral Chen was reviewing the data from his command center on Luna Base. The 60-year-old veteran had been preparing for this moment his entire career. Humanity had known they weren't alone in the universe for centuries, intercepting alien communications and observing distant civilizations. They had chosen isolation not from fear, but from wisdom learned through their own bloody history. Admiral Chen ordered the activation of Protocol 7, a defensive measure that had been theoretical until this very moment. Across the solar system, hidden installations powered up systems that had been dormant for decades. The quantum entanglement communication network came online, linking every human ship and station in real time, regardless of distance. Weapons platforms that had been disguised as asteroid mining facilities revealed their true purpose. The Zalathian scout ships detected the energy surge and immediately began transmitting data back to Commander Velrix. But something strange happened to their transmissions. The messages arrived corrupted, as if space itself was interfering with their communications. The scout ships tried to retreat to jump back into hyperspace but found their drives mysteriously non-functional. They were trapped in the Sol system like insects in amber. Commander Velrix received the garbled transmissions with growing concern. His scouts reported that human technology seemed to operate on principles that the Zalathians didn't understand. The humans weren't using conventional shields or weapons. Instead, they appeared to be manipulating fundamental forces in ways that should have been impossible for such a young species. The last clear transmission from the scouts was a single word that chilled even Velrix's battle-hardened soul. Impossible. The 5 scout ships vanished from Zalathian sensors simultaneously. There was no explosion, no debris field, no sign of weapons fire. They simply ceased to exist as if they had never been there at all. The only evidence of their fate was a message that appeared on Commander Velrix's personal display, written in perfect Zalathian script. Your scouts are safe. They will be returned when you leave. This is your only warning. Commander Velrix felt rage burning in his chest. No species had ever dared to threaten the Zalathian Empire so boldly. He ordered his entire fleet to prepare for immediate departure to the Sol system. 300 warships, the pride of the Empire, would teach these primitive humans the price of defying Zalathian authority. He sent a message to the Galactic Assembly, declaring his intention to pacify the human threat once and for all. The response from the Assembly was swift and unexpected. Every single elder race, even those who were enemies of each other, sent the same message. Do not enter Terran space. The warning exists for a reason, but Velrix dismissed their concerns as cowardice. The elder races had grown soft, too accustomed to peace and diplomacy. The Zalathian Empire would show them that strength, not fear, should guide the galaxy. As the massive fleet prepared to jump to hyperspace, Sub-Commander Krylos approached his commander with historical documents he had discovered in the deepest archives. The records told of 3 previous attempts to conquer Earth. The first was by the Precari Consortium, who sent 50 ships and received them back as perfectly arranged atoms. The second was the Mollusk Hegemony, whose 100-ship fleet was returned to them traveling backwards through time, arriving before they had left. The third was the Crystal Collective, who sent 200 ships and received back 200 perfectly functional ships with no crew aboard. Just a note saying thank you for the donation. Commander Velrix read the reports and laughed. These were clearly exaggerations, myths created to frighten the weak. No species could possess such power and remain confined to a single star system. It defied all logic, all known patterns of galactic civilization. He ordered the fleet to proceed with the jump, confident that Zalathian superiority would prevail as it always had. Humanity's response. Admiral Chen stood in the Strategic Command Center buried deep beneath Luna's surface, surrounded by holographic displays showing every ship in the Zalathian fleet. His staff worked with practiced efficiency, their fingers dancing across haptic interfaces as they coordinated humanity's response. The room hummed with focused energy, but there was no panic, no fear. They had been preparing for this moment for 300 years, ever since humanity had discovered they were not alone in the universe. The quantum entanglement defense grid was humanity's greatest secret, developed through a combination of theoretical physics and practical engineering that had taken centuries to perfect. It didn't work like conventional shields or weapons. Instead, it manipulated probability itself, creating zones where certain outcomes became impossible. Within the grid's influence, hostile actions simply couldn't occur. Weapons would malfunction, shields would fail, and aggressive intentions would fade into confusion. Dr. Sarah Chen, the Admiral's daughter and lead scientist of the Quantum Defense Initiative, monitored the grid's status from her laboratory on Phobos. Her team had spent decades refining the system, running countless simulations against every possible threat scenario. The Zalathian fleet represented their first real-world test, and she watched with a mixture of excitement and apprehension as 300 alien warships emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the solar system. Commander Velrix immediately ordered his fleet into battle formation. The Eternal Conquest led the charge, its massive plasma cannons charging to full power. The commander stood at his command station, all four arms working in perfect coordination as he directed the assault. This would be a glorious victory, one that would be remembered for generations. The humans had made a fatal error in threatening the Zalathian Empire. The first volley of plasma fire launched toward Earth with enough combined energy to shatter a small moon. The beams traveled at near light speed, carrying destruction that had ended civilizations. But as they crossed into the inner solar system, something extraordinary happened. The plasma beams began to slow, their energy dissipating into harmless light that painted beautiful auroras across Earth's magnetosphere. Children on Earth's night side pointed at the sky in wonder, thinking it was a special light show. Commander Velrix watched in disbelief as his weapons proved utterly ineffective. He ordered the fleet to advance to close the distance and engage with kinetic weapons. But as the ships moved deeper into the solar system, their crews began experiencing something unprecedented. The aggression that had driven them to this point began to fade, replaced by an overwhelming sense of curiosity about these strange humans who could create such impossible defenses. Subcommander Krylos was the first to notice the change in his own thinking. The tactical scenarios he had been running in his mind shifted from conquest to communication. He found himself wondering about human culture, their art, their music, their stories. Around him, other crew members were experiencing similar shifts. Warriors who had never questioned an order in their lives began asking why they were attacking a species that had done them no harm. Admiral Chen activated the communication array and sent a message to the Zalathian fleet in their own language. His words were calm and measured, carrying neither threat nor fear. He explained that humanity had learned from its own violent history that true strength came not from the ability to destroy, but from the ability to choose not to. The quantum defense grid was designed not to harm attackers, but to remove the possibility of harm entirely. The human admiral offered Commander Velrix a choice. The Zalathian fleet could leave peacefully, with their scout ships returned unharmed, and humanity would share certain technological advances that could benefit the Empire's civilian population, or they could remain in the solar system, experiencing the gradual dissolution of their aggressive impulses until their crews requested asylum on Earth. The choice was theirs, but humanity would not allow violence to enter their space. Commander Velrix felt his mind struggling against the field's influence. His warrior's pride demanded that he continue the attack, but he could no longer remember why conquering Earth had seemed so important. His crew was beginning to question orders, something that had never happened in Zalathian military history. Some were even expressing interest in learning more about human philosophy and their concept of protective pacifism. Dr. Sarah Chen observed the Zalathian commander's struggle with professional interest. The quantum field was working exactly as designed, not controlling minds but simply making certain neural pathways impossible to maintain. Aggression required specific thought patterns that couldn't exist within the field's influence. It was, she reflected, the ultimate expression of humanity's journey from a violent past to a more enlightened future. On Earth, the population watched the events unfold through public broadcasts. There was no panic, no calls for violence against the alien invaders. Humanity had moved beyond such responses centuries ago. Instead, there was curiosity about these Zalathians, discussions about what cultural exchanges might be possible, and preparations to welcome any who chose to remain peacefully. Commander Velrix made his decision after hours of internal struggle. He ordered his fleet to withdraw, accepting Admiral Chen's offer of peaceful exchange. As the Zalathian ships prepared to leave, the 5 scout vessels materialized beside them, their crews unharmed but forever changed by their experience. They spoke of conversations with humans, of learning about Earth's history, of understanding why this species had chosen isolation. The scout crews reported that humans had fought every kind of war imaginable. They had nearly destroyed themselves multiple times, had committed atrocities that haunted their collective memory. But from that darkness they had emerged with a profound understanding. True evolution meant moving beyond violence as a solution. The quantum defense grid was not a weapon, but a manifestation of that philosophy, a way to make war literally impossible within their space. As the Zalathian fleet departed, they carried with them gifts from humanity. Medical technologies that could cure diseases that had plagued the Empire for millennia, agricultural techniques that could feed billions without destroying ecosystems, energy systems that could power civilizations without depleting resources. But most importantly, they carried a new understanding of strength. The Galactic Assembly received Commander Velrix's report with a mixture of relief and wonder. The Zalathians, the most aggressive military power in the galaxy, were advocating for a new approach to interstellar relations. They shared the truth about humanity, a species that had weaponized peace itself, that had made violence obsolete through technology and wisdom. Elder races who had maintained the warning about Earth for millennia finally revealed the full truth. Humanity had been quarantined not because they were dangerous in the traditional sense, but because they needed time to complete their evolution. They had needed isolation to move from a species that excelled at war to one that had transcended it entirely. The quantum defense grid was proof that they had succeeded. Admiral Chen received a message from the Galactic Assembly, inviting humanity to join as full members. But the response from Earth's united government was polite but clear. Humanity would maintain its borders and its isolation, though they would share knowledge that could help other species evolve beyond violence. They would be teachers, not conquerors, guides rather than rulers. The warning about Terran space remained in place, but its meaning had changed. It was no longer a warning about human aggression, but about human transcendence. Any species that entered Earth space would find their capacity for violence neutralized, their aggressive impulses impossible to maintain. It was a protection for both humanity and those who might wish them harm. Years passed and the galaxy slowly changed. Species that had been at war for centuries found themselves seeking Earth's counsel. The quantum defense technology was never shared, but the philosophy behind it spread throughout the galaxy. Wars became less common. Conflicts were resolved through discussion rather than destruction. The Zalathian Empire transformed from a military power to a force for exploration and discovery. Commander Velrix, in his final years, wrote extensively about his encounter with humanity. He described it not as a defeat, but as a liberation from cycles of violence that had defined his species for millennia. He established an academy dedicated to studying human philosophy, attracting students from across the galaxy who sought to understand how a species could evolve beyond its own violent nature. Humanity remained in its single star system, content with what they had built. They had no need for galactic expansion when they had transformed their own space into a paradise. Earth became a symbol of what was possible when a species chose wisdom over power, protection over conquest, peace over war. The warning about Terran space stood as a reminder that some boundaries were not meant to be crossed, not because of danger, but because of the transformation that crossing them would bring. The galaxy had learned the most important lesson humanity had to offer. True strength was not in the ability to destroy, but in the ability to make destruction impossible. The warning about Terran space would remain forever, not as a threat but as a promise of what every species could eventually become.